Aloha, everybody. This is Cathy Bilsky, the Quantum Leap Let Light Unite show on UPRN Radio, and this is October 28th, 2018. This is a real special show tonight, and this is all in honor of Halloween next week, and I wanted to do something really special and something I don't normally do. And I have scored and brought on this very famous psychic, and she's a dowser, and she finds lost treasures, and she's the coolest person ever. So she's going to come on tonight, and if you get on the phones quick enough, she's going to let you ask one question. So the phone line is 504-273-7379. Now, let me tell you, this is coming on. Hi, Ginette. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you, Cathy.
So now I'm going to tell everybody about you, okay?
Great. Let's do it.
Well, Ginette's work is a double-edged sword. In one sense, people want to prove her wrong. In another sense, people believe that she and other psychics can be correct. In an article for the Smithsonian Magazine titled Urban New Agers Take Over the Art of Dowsing, the author Jack Hope tested several dowsers for the article and actually wanted to prove them incorrect. Ginette was the only one to find not one but two missing objects, legal paperwork, and two separate pieces. So surprised, he wrote a half a page on Ginette about her forensic dowsing and location work. Now, in her buried treasure work, you can find her on YouTube with host Terry Carter, 2018, discussing her El Capone buried treasure hidden by Ray Nitty in Southern Illinois. Over 60 bars of silver from a government Treasury Department truck robbery. Now, one of her great success stories in locating treasure is an Al Capone robbery case. Now, Al's partner in crime was Ray Nitty, who had buried his portion of the robbery and hid it in southern Chicago. Ginette's clients had her pinpoint the location on a map with over 50,000 acres. The men found the treasure using high-tech equipment in about 45 minutes, finding over 60 U.S. mint bars of solid silver. And just last week, Ginette helped two treasure hunters find a 10,000 gold ring from 1920 using metal detectors. God, you've got to be so much fun to take on vacations.
I don't know. I I don't know if my husband says that. He's the cook. But it's fun. It's fun. There's so many good things to do on vacation. I tell people to get into treasure hunting because there's so much out there. It's really amazing.
Well, how did you get started in this?
Well, quickly, I'll just tell you my father is Louis Matacia, who is a water dowser, and he also used the same technique to figure out a system to locate booby traps and bombs for Vietnam. And after he taught the military, I thought, why not find missing people and that kind of thing? My dad did find a couple of missing people, but he did not like it. And so I had a real affinity with mysteries and police, and I think I was more interested in missing people to be found alive. And then I was pushed into finding missing people abducted and murdered. So it's all the land of mystery. So it was sort of when I was zigging, I had to zag, and then I fell off the cliff and fell into it and loved it, and I'm really good at it.
Well, you've also had a very interesting background of life. I mean, you had 3 near-death experiences. And how did that help you shift?
Well, I think that a lot of people don't know that when you have a near-death experience, every one of them are different. They're never identical. And mine were very weird because the first one was one way, and do you want me to tell people what happened to each, general idea on each and every one? Would you like me to share that with you?
Sure.
Okay, so on the first one, and not everybody gets this. I was talked to. I died in an accident, not a car accident, an accident, and I was told that the people that came in the room said, "We're representatives of God, and you're dying, and we're going to fix you." And I was only 7, so I think a lot of that was based on what could I comprehend at 7. So they somehow sewed my head back up. And in reality, my head was never sewn back up. In fact, I've shown it to doctors, and they said they've never seen anything like it. I mean, I'm not going to fib, it hurt pretty bad. I mean, it felt like they put their fingers on my head and touched my head, and it felt like a burning sensation. It was pretty weird. But they said they were my actual parents from a previous life. They talked about reincarnation, and they talked about my future, that my whole life was going to change at 27. And I was going to have another near death at 27. And I did. And that sort of shocked me because I didn't understand the word near death and that the whole concept was going to happen again. So if you read your life.
When you say you didn't understand the term near death, explain it to everybody. What does that mean? Does that mean you actually die?
You actually, there's two. I heard today, I was reading up on something today, and when you die or you flatline and then come back, that's a near-death experience. But not everyone is at the hospital when you have your experience. My first one, I wasn't at the hospital. The second one I was, and the third one I was. There's also, I guess, a spiritual, they call it a spiritual awakening or whatever, but it's very similar to a near death, where it's you pretty much are a meth head or something like that, or a person having a massive heart attack, and you go out quickly and you come back, and they're coining that more of a spiritual awakening, but in my book it's pretty much a near death experience. Did that answer your question? Basically,
well,
would
you consider that something different than a walk-in coming in?
No, but I am fascinated by walk-ins. I mean, I personally, I think it's very complicated, and it would be a whole nother time to talk about. But I'm very suspicious of it. I do think it could happen. I mean, you're out of your body. Somebody else could come in. I do remember the first time I had my first experience, they talked about a lot of odd things happening. What I thought was very interesting, parallel to what you're talking about, a walk-in coming in, when I was told about my second near death, I was told that not to worry. I would be alerted when it was coming, and I would be given details. Oh, this is coming soon, like a deja vu. And what was really interesting is they told me Shirley MacLaine was going to write a book, and they showed me the cover of her book. I was 7 years old and I saw this picture of Shirley MacLaine. She just happened to be my mom's favorite actress, and she looked similar to my mom. So I knew right away, oh, okay, I get it. I've got it. What was interesting was on the second near death, I did talk, when I went up to the heavens, I did talk to them about walk-ins, and I did talk to them about the change and so forth. I died in the hospital in Fairfax, Virginia, and what happened was, when I went up to the heavens, they said they were going to fix me or change me or do something unusual to me. And I thought, you're going to feel immediately thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, this is scary and creepy. Am I going to be me, or am I going to be, because I'd heard about walk-ins, am I going to be a walk-in? What is going on? I didn't get a description of the definition of the whole deal. But they did say they were going to change me and fix me. But I was very, very ill on my second near death. I had kidney failure. And so I'm wondering if they said they were fixing me, like fixing my kidneys to survive the near death. So I don't think I'm a walk-in. I mean, I could have, when I was up in the heavens, we did talk about a lot of things. I mean, I haven't written a book yet, but I will. And so I'm not going to say walk-ins don't exist, because when you communicate with the upstairs, they talk about so many factors and so many things and so many topics. And then I've talked to other people, and they got in and they got to meet Jesus. They were happy. They felt a loving environment. I definitely felt the loving environment. The walk-in term was never mentioned. Reincarnation never mentioned. They didn't get to meet God. They were afraid to touch Jesus. It's very interesting that you mentioned the walk-in, because I'm still very fascinated by it, and I can't discount it.
Well, to me, a walk-in would be, and this is my interpretation, that somebody actually dies, and they could be a teenager, maybe 18, 19, and then another totally different entity comes in at that time. And that new entity now, literally, he's a little bit detached and not, he is a different person. He didn't have to go through all those life experiences, being a teenager and all that. But, he does have that memory. So that, to me, is a totally different entity.
That's what I would think. But then again, we all have different viewpoints. I think I don't think it's been researched enough. And again, I think there's still, doctors are still doing, I don't want to say the word research, I wanted to say studies on people that have died and that kind of thing. I just heard recently that, the more you read, the less you know. And I heard recently that the body and the brain, there's a consciousness is separate from the body, and they found that out with near-death experiences. And I thought that was really intriguing. I just know that I was told they were going to change me. I don't know what to tell you, except for I became a lot more serious at 27 about my life. And I don't know how other people feel. Again, you'd have to pick up a book like somebody saying, oh, I was a walk-in or something. But then again, you'd want to have a little bit of, I'm one of those black and white people. I'd like some proof, like, is it on paper? Did you flatline? What hospital? All the environmental things affecting the circumstance.
When you were 7, though, were you this psychic, or did you get more psychic after your third near-death experience?
I was pretty intuitive at 7 because I was around my father a lot, and he gave pointers to dreams, and he started us off with dreams, and he started us off with some crazy stuff like, you might think it's crazy. Now again, you're pretty bright, so you may not think it's crazy. What he did was he would drive us around in the back of the long station wagons, the real old station wagons, and he would lay us down in the back of the car, and he said, okay, while I'm driving down the street, what do you see? And we would say, well, we're in our neighborhood. And he would say, yes, you are. Then 10 minutes later, he said, where am I now? And we would say, we're over near the elementary school, or we're near the high school, or we're near this, or we're in a more wealthier neighborhood. And it was a test to see what we could perceive, what we felt, to see that if we were abducted, could we come home, that kind of thing. And there were 5 of us, so my father was a little paranoid that, oh my gosh, I want to make sure all the kids are safe and that they know how to get home, or to go talk to a cop for safety factor if we ever get abducted. But years ago, abductions were sort of quiet in the news. Now it's all over the news, which is great. So how was my intuition? I think I was intuitive, but I think it was starting to get developed at 7. By the time I was 27, I became a full-time psychic. And a lot of people were surprised because I was just an average executive secretary at the time. And then I got really ill, and I don't think people knew how ill I was, and I never told people. But again, near-death experience is very complicated, and we all have something to say. So let's go back to your questions. I think there's a build-up, a development situation with your psychic ability. I would say I bet 20% of the people that have had a near death have come back as a full-time psychic.
Wow. Now, how has this helped you tap into the other world, to, people that have passed on?
Right. Well, I think from my experience, I'm able to hear the other side easier. I mean, we have the Long Island psychic who has definitely run a pathway of she hears this and she hears that, and she talks to the deceased. And I do that too. But mine is a little different, where I give dates and times and names and that kind of thing. And I think that, I think she's very good. Some people are still on the fence about her, but I think she's really good. And I have a lot of abilities. I can touch something and get information, like a vision, or the new word is remote viewing. For example, if I'm doing a missing person case or a missing object case, I can touch an object or a piece of paper, and I sort of plug it in my brain, thinking about it, and then I get more data or more input. I do feel very fortunate that because I've already been to the other side, I can talk more readily to the other side, in the sense of, when I go to bed at night, I have dreams, and I tell the heavens I need information. And I call it cheating, because it's just I get surprised by what I get or perceive. And I tell people, if you don't ask, you don't, that old cliche, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I do think that my dream state has definitely quadrupled, and I get predictive information. For example, I predicted 9/11, and I predicted the timing and the city and the airplanes and the airlines and the date. I predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall. Last week, my sister came in for a reading, and she said, okay, what's going on in the news? Because I was gearing up for predictions for January 2019. And I said, oh God, bombs. And she goes, what? And I said, yeah, I see these bombs, and somebody's going to be planting bombs. And she said, okay. And here in the news, this guy, mailing bombs. A few weeks ago, whenever the Las Vegas shooter came on, I had predicted something to do with that, but I didn't go public with it because it was so frightening. I stood back and I just said, no, I'm not gonna talk about this one publicly. Sometimes I do see some stuff that is morbid and sad. I'd rather see more positive stuff. Sometimes I'm given information that is very helpful, and sometimes I'm given information that isn't helpful at all. Like if I said, oh yeah, you're going to talk to your sons, you were saying you want to talk to your sons, and it fell into place, which was great. That's happy news. I'd rather give more happy news. On missing objects, that's more happy news. Missing persons, you have a 50-50. You find them alive or you find them dead. It's black and white. It's very factual.
Wow. And you said your dad was a very famous dowser. Yeah, it sounded like when you were growing up that your father was training you. And, one of the things that we used to tell ourselves when we were growing up, awakened and training ourselves to be psychics, it's use it or lose it. So he was getting you guys to constantly focus and use your abilities. Wow, your dad sounded awesome.
I think he, to this day, people know of him worldwide because of his military training with the usage of dowsing to find underground tunnels, to find booby traps, bombs, that kind of thing. And then he goes home to his 5 kids and says, oh, let's go find this missing object, or let's go visualize this. It's a little different, but I'm sure you teach your kids who are now adults various things too. I mean, I'm sure you were influential in their decision making. I really do try to influence people to talk to the parent and get a lot of opinions from the parent versus their friends. And if you want to use your intuition, if your gut shows you a very bad feeling, then your friend is lying. If your gut is not feeling any negativity at all, and it all feels smooth, it's like a translation, then you're okay. What I'm trying to say is I figured out there's a formula to this, and I can do a lot of things with my particular formulas, and it really works. I constantly find missing objects all the time. For example, you work in the energy field and you're a healer, and I assume you have a formula for your healing work, correct?
Correct.
Yep. And I'm sure that you've tried to teach your kids, hey, try this, try that, try this. I reach out to people like you, or refer my clients to people like you, or I refer my clients to a homeopathic doctor, and I say, hey, listen, if you don't want to do healing, try this. And if that doesn't work, go back to the healer. And I think some people are ready for it and some people are not. But I do find all the above terrific. I really do. Even though I may have that talent in healing, my plate is too full, and I have to rely on people like you.
Well, yeah, I understand completely, especially for me, because I also do the healing, but I also own a store, and people will come in and they go, you really should make this. And it's like, sure, I'll put it far back on my list. Yeah,
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's almost like owning an antique shop, and they come in and they want something you don't have. And then you say, are you sure you want it? And they say, oh, yeah, I want it. And you're thinking to yourself, no, they don't want it. They think they want it, but they don't want that. They want this. And so, in this field, the paranormal field is super weird, and it's super fun, and it's super goofy, and you just have to take it a step at a time. And so I tell people, if you want to start off somewhere, you're not going to get my moments or your moments, but there are fun moments, and I always push people into incubating a dream or taking their dreams that they have and titling them and figuring out how to help themselves to be a better person, or help them with their career, or help them with the stock exchange, or help them with a missing object. And that is the quickest, fastest way to develop their psychic skills. And that's, in my opinion. And that's why I tell people, try out the dream stuff, because it really works. Do you have?
What are you talking about when you say try out this dream stuff?
Well, what I do is I teach people, for example, I'm going to be teaching a class in DC coming up. And what I do is I tell people, if you want to start your personal development on your psychic ability, they're not going to be a healer like you. They're not going to be excessive like me with the missing person or, the dowsing and the missing objects. Probably not. But if they want to take a bit of their psychic ability or intuitive ability and use it, my recommended starting point would be taking their dreams, writing them down, theming them, and when they do, they can start figuring out a prediction for themselves, whether it's career or anything else. Like a missing dog, missing kitty, They can be their own problem solver.
We've talked about dowsing, but I don't think maybe people don't understand what it is. Can you explain?
Sure. So historically, dowsing was a person walking down the street looking for water, and they took a forked stick, and the stick, when the man had it, for example, a man had it in his head that he was looking for water, the stick would point downward to the earth, and it was almost like a magnetic pull, and you would find water. Based on your questioning, you would find what you're looking for. So if you were saying, I want to find an apple, the dowsing stick would point up toward the trees. If you were looking for your missing kitty, it would be in a neutral zone, and then a neutral path. And then when you got near where your kitty was, the forked stick would go down. Well, now we have what's called remote dowsing, which is what I do. I use a pendulum and a map. So if I'm in Virginia, I'll say I'm looking for this missing object. Let's say it's specifically jewelry. Somebody called about some jewelry recently, and I have to write down the kind of jewelry and all the details, the person's name. And again, I have a process or a formula. And then what I do is I use the pendulum to dowse yes or no to try to find the missing object. A little bit more complicated. There's some beginner books out there. I only sell our advanced books, only because that's my profession. On dowsing with, some people may have seen dowsing with an L rod, which is, it literally is shaped in the shape of an L, and you carry one in each hand, and when it opens up, that means yes. When it's closed, it means no. And you can find water, you can find your missing animals, you can find your missing kid, you can find your missing toys or your jewelry. I mean, it's a lot of fun. And it's very family friendly. So if that gives you a general idea, my father used the same technique to find booby traps and bombs for Vietnam on a map while he was in Virginia for the U.S. Marines in Vietnam or the Air Force. For example, a lot of people know of one of the generals that used it during World War II. They didn't have water for World War II for one of their attacks. So they had a water dowser pinpoint on a map where they'd find a potable water well. They dug it, got the water, and the men had plenty of water during the attack, and they won the attack because they had the water. I mean, you can survive most any type of, like, for example, in Mexico, Florida, I guess you call it, or whatever the town was in Florida that got damaged. If you have water, you can survive for 2-3 days without food. And then all of a sudden you get to the people that are offering free food, like Waffle House, you know. I hope that helps.
It does. So there's also, what you're saying, a lot of different dowsing tools that people can use. Now you got the pendulum and then the L rod. Now, can you also just use one L rod, or do you always have to use two?
No, you can use one. There's also a what do you call it? A Cameron orometer, and it's one on a spring. So they're all different. They're all designed differently. I do carry dowsing equipment or tools at your shop.
Do I? Oh, yes, pendulums.
Okay, so we have, for example, my dad has. They're called a divining stick, and they're made out of a fishing pole. And you put 2 fishing poles together, and you tie it up with tape. And those things can go up and down. The only thing I don't like about them is you get hit in the face, because if the reaction is too quick, it slaps you in the face. And it's almost like a Google alert. Hey, idiot, the water's right here. Or, hey, idiot, what you're looking for is over there. It's, instead of pointing, it's more of a question and answer period. It's like yes or no, that kind of thing. So it is a lot of fun. It is a good starting point, but I think dreams are a lot easier for people to start off with than dowsing. If they want to get into dowsing, there's always the Association of American Society of Dowsers, and they have some really great basic classes. Now, you're in Hawaii. They may have a chapter in Hawaii. I'm not sure. They used to. But in fact, do you use the pendulum or you don't?
I use the pendulum.
You do? Okay. So, you could always offer a class, and maybe, if you get enough people, they'll come to class and say, hey, tell me all about it. But all they have to do is learn the basics from you, and then they can learn some more advanced techniques. There are books out there. As I mentioned, I only sell our advanced books that my father wrote. There are some great books by a guy by the name of Walter Woods, for example. Again, they're the next stage or advanced dowsing. I use dowsing with my dreams. I combine any parapsychology with my dowsing and with my work, and I find that it increases accuracy rate. It's almost like the near-death experiences I had, they all increased my accuracy rate. It certainly is a definite epiphany when you have a near death, because it's in your face. I mean, it's a wake up call, and at one moment you'll feel like it's negative, and the next minute you'll feel like it's positive. Oh, okay, I survived. It was very loving and caring. I haven't met in person any near-death experiencers. I've only met them online. And our verbiage is very similar, which I think is very fascinating. Some of the people I've talked to, I definitely gravitate to, but most of them tend to be very positive. It's just that when you have a near-death, it's a shock, as if you're sitting in a chair and someone says, "Get out of the chair," and you're not allowed to get in this chair ever again. And it's sort of again a wake-up call of, okay, you can't do this, you have to do this. Again, it's almost like zigzagging. It's really very odd.
Well, in effect, of course, you're going through it, but how did it affect your family members towards you? Did they notice a difference?
The only thing I think my family members noticed was that when I was a kid and I've had my first near-death experience, they just couldn't figure out how I got well so quickly after my first near-death. On the second near-death, I called my dad right away and told him what had happened. Mine was weird. I was in the hospital, and I guess they put me into an induced coma, and then I died and came back. He was surprised. He said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, it happened, and I want to tell you about it in case I actually die and don't come back." So I wanted to share it with him real quick to say, this is what happened, and this is what I walked through, and so forth. I think he was more interested than any other family member. All the other family members were just surprised I survived. On my third near death, I was on the operating table, and I have a twin, and she was just shocked that it actually occurred. I think it's almost like a three-part process. You go in the hospital, or you have at the beginning of the near death. The circumstance happens. It's like you're on the pending list. You go to heaven, you come back, and people are thinking, "Oh, I'm so happy that you're back." Some people don't have a memory of their near death at all. They just know they flatlined. I was told I flatlined, but I did have a situation happening while I flatlined. I mean, I was above my body and watched the nurses, and a lot of other situations did occur to me. But my husband, for example, was around when the third near death happened, and he was just happy to have me. And I was glad about that. He's never asked me about it, but my twin sister is showing a lot more interest in it now.
See, that's what I was going to ask you about. How did it affect her? And, is this an identical twin?
She's an identical mirror twin, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that means she also psychic like you were when you guys were young? And when you shifted, did she see any shift in her psychic abilities?
I think she sees her shift more now. I think one of the reasons she's shifted dramatically is because she came down with stage 3 cancer. And she seems to be a lot more sensitive to what's going on. And I've noticed the people we hang around are lovely. And I find that when you're around that vibe, your psychic ability increases. I don't know if you feel that way, but I just see a difference in her asking every other week about a psychic reading and what's going on in the news. And she said, "Oh, I had a dream about this." So she's becoming more open with her personal development or intuition.
Well, but it sounded like, though, that did she always talk to you about this when you were younger? Or, like you said, this is just really expanding now?
I think it's expanding now. I don't know that they used to watch me when I was a kid, and I would do readings for people. When I got older, and when I say older, from 7th to 3rd grade, I started giving readings, and they were just shocked about me just saying, I was sitting there with adults at a table, and I would just tell them what I saw coming, and they would just sit there and wonder, how could I see pictures in a deck of cards, or how could I see pictures on a piece of paper? And they sort of blew it off and ran outside to play. But all of us have different ways that we get our psychic ability. I mean, of course, there's the Edgar Cayce Foundation. I don't think he had an accident. I think he just fell asleep, had a dream, and they told him what to do. A lot of times I'm given information very similar. Here's your dream, and this is what you do. And it's sometimes I regret telling people bad news. I do it very delicately, or sometimes I withhold until I feel like the person is ready to hear the information.
That's honorable. So let's talk about your treasure work, if we can, for a few minutes. So do you actually yourself go out looking for treasure, or is it mostly people coming to you now and you guiding them?
I would say most of the people come to me because I have people from out of state. For example, people in Texas or New Mexico. I have a client who just flew out to the Philippines, and they're working on some projects. The only thing I want to tell people, if you're going to get into buried treasure, follow the rules, or you can be arrested quickly. You can't be on someone's private property and just start digging for fun. I have some new treasure hunters that are just buying expensive pieces of equipment. Some of the equipment can go as far as 100,000. Some of them are 8,000. I have a guy that called today, and he said, okay, I'm ready to buy the piece that's 2,000. I mean, here's one of the tricky pieces of equipment I'll describe to you. It's really fascinating. When you go out and take a metal detector out above water, you have to buy the metal detector that can go above either salt water or regular water. And so they're totally different pieces of equipment. And so you're going to spend a little bit more if you're going to go to the beach and go right over the salt water. But it's worth it because, I mean, you can find rings and bars and gold and jewelry. It's really fun.
Well, I was actually thinking how much fun it would be to do that in our bay here at Kealakekua Bay, because I know I've lost quite a few things in that bay.
Well, I wonder if your area might have rentals, and rentals may not be as costly, or sometimes they have refurbished equipment or training classes on using a metal detector, because there are a variety of them. And the beginner ones are going to cost around $800 to $1,200, but then again, you're going to go for, you don't want to go for one that'll go 4 inches deep. You want to buy a metal detector that goes about 2 feet deep. But, going back to your question, do I go out in the field? I've been out in the field. I don't mind it. I have had clients find some really fun stuff. When you find Civil War items like in Virginia, it just, every time you pick something up and you find it, it's finding a piece of history in your hand. And it's just, you're still awed. Every time you do it, it's like, oh my God, wow, wow, wow. And somebody was actually touching this, 1700s, 1800s. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, all the guys finding the belt buckles. Oh my gosh, what is it? 1865, 66, 67. I mean, it's amazing. Some of the stuff is amazing to me also, because if it's stuck in a mud, like clay mud, it can come out perfect, in perfect shape. Other times you can see stuff and it's totally rusty and you can't read it. So then you have to take the next step and go research it. So it's all good. Wow,
it does sound like fun, and I bet it can definitely be addicting. Aren't you working with a friend of ours now? He went to the Philippines to do some treasure hunting. I don't know what he's looking for, but
he's going after some archaeological digs right now, and he took his high tech equipment. So yeah, it was my client, and he had the equipment, so he went on over. But he is following the rules. You have to register with the country of the Philippines, and you have to tell them where you're going, and they get 70% of the find. But you know what? If you only get 30% of the find, for considering what you're going to find, better to be safe than sorry. In the Philippines, they consider it treason if you're stealing things out of the Philippines. So it's not worth being shot over.
Wow. No, not when you put it that way.
No.
Wow. So all kinds of people from all walks of life then come to you for all different reasons, to reconnect with a loved one. Now, if they want you to reconnect with a loved one, do they actually need a picture or something that belonged to them for you to tap into it?
It depends on what I'm doing. If they just want to talk to a loved one, I normally charge about $150, and I if they want to find something in the house, that's what I like to do, because then the loved one will tell me where the missing item is, or they can talk to the loved one. I can say, okay, your loved one is saying this, this, and this. I'm giving more detail, talking about another loved one. For example, somebody called the other day and they wanted an appointment, and I had to give her some information on some relatives. And I said, well, there's this woman here, and her name feels like M, like Mary. I said, if I'm wrong, it feels like M or Mary Ann, maybe something like that. And she said, yes, my grandmother was Mary, and that's who I wanted to talk to. And so sometimes it's super easy. Other times I'll get a name, like I had this happen to me one time. I said, oh, there's a woman here, and she said she feels like she was strangled, but it was really that she choked to death. And don't feel guilty. You didn't have anything to do with it, even though you couldn't save her. It was just, she choked on food. And I said, her name was, I said a V. I said, V like Vicky, V like Victoria, V. And she goes, no, I don't know who that is. An hour later, she called me screaming, oh my God, her nickname, her real name was like Velvet. And it was so funny. I mean, that was a hard name to get. Some names are hard for me to get. And, so she called back and said, yes, you're right. That's who it was. Other times, I mean, it's very rare I can't get the information. I was in California for a little bit years ago, and a gentleman came in, and I said, your deceased relative told me you have a heart condition and you need to see a doctor ASAP or you're going to die. And I said, you'll be dead in 10 days. And he said, what? And I said, I need you to go to the doctor right away. And a few months later, I never heard from the guy. And eventually, a few months later, I heard from him, and he goes, I want to tell you, you saved my life. I told everybody at work, and I told him what you said. They said that you were crazy, but go ahead and go to the doctor. And it turned out he had an irregular heartbeat, and they had to do some massive surgery. And his doctor said, had you not come in here, you would be dead. That's it, boom, done. There's no question. He said, how did you know to come here? He said, some psychic told me I was sick through one of my deceased relatives. And
I'm sorry, but that had to mind screw the doctor. I could see him head twitching like,
Oh yeah, and it's no different than you as a healer. I mean, people will probably say, I need this, this, and this, and you're probably going over their picture and thinking, oh, you additionally need this, this, and this. And that does occur. I mean, I've read people, and I said, oh, in 5 years, you need to monitor possible breast cancer, but you're going to be okay. I mean, people call here, I'm worried, I'm going to go to the doctor, and they think it's breast cancer. And I said, even if it is, you're going to be fine. So I didn't promise chemo and radiation, but for some reason, for example, that particular woman is doing great. I just had a call from somebody else that 14 years later, yes, I came back. It's okay. Go do what you got to do. You're going to be fine. And there are so many wonderful options now with the medical industry. A lot of people are surviving. As you well know, I mean, you're in the healing business, so I'm sure you see lots of miracles and have miracles happen all the time.
Yeah, sure do. As I say, I'm not the doctor's friend.
No. Mm-mm. It is a double-edged sword. I mean, people want to hear information about themselves, and the next minute they don't want to hear it. I don't want to know. I mean, people call me, can I just get a reading where it's just positive, nothing negative? But sometimes, if it was like a death in the family, and I say there's going to be a death in the family, it's going to happen at a time frame, and it is going to cause a domino effect in a good way. For example, I told a woman she was going to inherit like 300,000, but then it was going to go to 3 million, and she actually slapped me in the face and said, "You're a liar and a freak," and blah blah blah. And 2 weeks later, her husband called me and had her call and chat with me and said she did. Her neighbors across the street didn't have a daughter. They treated her like a daughter, and they left her 300,000, and she was to get a few million from the actual will and estate. And she was just so perplexed by it. She was like, I never knew they had that much money. I mean, surprises do come. Good stuff does come. I mean,
well, I have to say, for people to read me, it's very, very hard. And I probably even told you that because you did give me a reading. And, a lot of it's coming true, and it is really positive. Sometimes it's you're a good reader, but how magical are you? Just by acknowledging it, I'm looking at you seem to be giving it energy to manifest. And even though you're not, and you're, predicting the future, yeah, it's really trippy because you're on.
Well, I definitely, I mean, I know your work is probably energy based and so forth, but I do think that if you go in one direction, when it comes to psychic ability and you're giving a prediction to your client, I call it the equation or the formula. You can say, oh, today you're going to do this, and that's going to affect 3 weeks from now. Or if I tell people don't do this because it's going to create some terrible damage. And I said, if you avoid that like the plague, meaning a problem, it's going to be terrific. And I've had people where they listen most of the time, and then other times they just don't listen at all. I mean, I'll never forget a girl that came in one time, and I said, you got this guy coming in. His name feels like J like James. He's been in prison before. Please do not marry him. But I'm going to bet you're going to marry him, have a baby. The baby feels like a boy. It's going to be happy for a time. You're still in love with him. But you may inspire him to do well, but it's going to be, I don't want to say tumultuous, but it'll be an up and down relationship because you are in love, he's in love, but you'll be together and it will probably be forever, but it's going to be a challenging relationship. It's going to be one of those that relationships should not be a chore, but it was a chore of a relationship. And she came back in and everything fell into place. She did marry him, she did have his baby, and he was going back in prison. And they're still together. I mean, they're happily in love, but your husband's in prison. That's tough. That's a chore.
That's true.
It's rough stuff.
True.
I mean, you wish everybody good news. There are some great stories where I've given a lottery number to somebody, which was hilarious, and she won about $10,000. I did it for another guy, and he won like $8,000 plus. And that doesn't always happen. I mean, people have called me, and I said, I'm sorry, I don't see any lottery numbers for you. The information can come, and boom, there's the information. It's great. And then other times, it's almost as if it's held back because you're either not ready for the funds, meaning, the lottery, or you're not ready for a relationship, and you just have to be real patient with what does come before the time of the reading.
I'm calling you tomorrow.
I hear you.
So if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Well, I'm in Virginia, so my telephone number is area code 571-358-1444. 571-358-1444, or they can look on Facebook under the name of Ginette Lucas, Paranormal Advisor. If they can't find that, there are other psychics by the name of the last name of Lucas, but look for the letter G and then Lucas, Ginette Lucas or Ginny Lucas. I was the Ginny Lucas on the Kaylee Anthony case, or Ginette Lucas from the Kaylee Anthony case with CNN and Nancy Grace. So a lot of times my name will pop up with the Casey Anthony case or the Kaylee Anthony case. And so I'm not difficult to find, but I tell people I'm not able to really talk until Monday. So if I don't pick up, it's going to be tough to talk to me until Monday. My plate is full of projects, and then once I clear my plate, it's easier to talk to people. So leave a message, leave your number twice, and we'll chat as quickly as we can.
Well, didn't you mention that you've also got a class in Washington, D.C. coming up?
I do. I'm teaching November 4, I believe that's a Sunday, and I'm giving a class on how to find your missing objects using dowsing or using your psychic ability or combining the two. And I also tell people, use your dowsing in dreams to find your missing objects. The reason I'm not covering missing persons is because I don't want people to run around and try to find a missing person and request the reward money. Missing objects is very gratifying because you can find a missing object and you say, hey, I did it. So the classes in DC or Silver Spring, they can always call me and I can give them the information on the class.
Great. Wow. Well, thank you, Ginette, for coming on tonight. You've really put out a lot of information. And yeah, I have to say, everybody, I really, really enjoyed the reading that she gave me. And she's the first psychic for me. And I've had many throughout the years that could actually predict something that came true. So, if you want some answers, and I would give her a call and, give her a try. It's worth it. She's really good. And I don't bring on people that I really don't believe in.
Well, thank you. And I'll tell you, happy Halloween. Yay.
Yay. Yeah. So do you want to give a quick prediction on what's going to happen with the November 5th election?
Well, I haven't really worked on it, and I prefer to work on it than to give a quick assessment. Can you give me a quick question? Are you wondering if the Democrats are going to take it and run with it?
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah.
Okay, well, what I'll do is, let's do this because I'd rather be accurate, I'd rather work on it and then call you back and say, or text you and say, hey, this is what I think, and you can announce it on your other show, another show.
Oh, great. Next week.
Right now, I'm trying to see if I can get the information quickly. It's not coming that quickly, but then again, it's 1 a.m. on the East Coast. So,
Well, there's a lot of things, I'm sure to think of, especially with all the disenfranchising the Republicans are doing to the Democrats and people. So, yeah, that's okay. I can wait for a really good answer because then I'll at least sleep really well tonight.
Exactly. And again, I'd rather give a more accurate answer, but it is a very controversial time, and there's a lot of debate over everything with the Republicans and the Democrats. Oh my God. And there's a lot of lies at the same time. So
oh my God, no. And what's really crazy is I know who all the players are. I mean, like I've got I've got better things to do than know who all the Congress people are and the senators and everybody in the cabinet, all the way up to Trump and his mobster family. Whoa. I think most of the people now in the United States know. We're getting a big lesson in civics.
Oh my God! This whole process, this presidency has been very unique. It's definitely an overboard, just overwhelming. Not just his family, Trump's family, but it's his conversations with so many people, or conversations with, oh, you're getting fired, and so forth. So it's tough.
Do you ever think that we are actually on a different timeline? It's a different parallel universe where they're actually trying to push us into another Nazi timeline. And the light workers are fighting back like not ever before. But wow, I mean, when Trump went on and said he's a nationalist, the only word he forgot was white. And, that's Hitler, that's Nazi. So, wow, yeah, it's really interesting. And I really think that Trump's the son of Hitler.
He's very different.
Well, let me do my last real quick before we go off. Now, they were doing DNA and genetic testing way back in World War II. Mengele was. Remember the boys from Brazil where they tried to clone Hitler? Okay.
Yep.
So now you think, now, why did Trump's mother hate him? Well, if you're forced to have a son of Hitler, I don't think you'd have warm and fuzzies, but because your husband was part of the KKK and a white nationalist, you'd be proud to have Hitler's baby, wouldn't you? So this is what they get, this really stupid, angry, evil Trump. Anyway, that's my take, and I'm going to stick to it.
I hear you. I'm going to remain neutral. I have no idea why. I know Trump's environment played a large part about his personality.
Yes, indeed. And, let's end on another more positive note. So thank you again for coming on. And maybe next time people will actually be brave enough to call in.
Oh, absolutely. Well, tonight's the baseball game, so they could be hooked to that. So I'm sure you're at this point, we'll wait till the archives come out and we'll go from there. All right, Cathy, and I'll get back to you as quick as I can on Democrats or Republicans for the win.
All right. You take care, and you have a good evening. And thank you for staying up so late for me.
No problem. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. Aloha, and we will catch you next week. And have a great weekend and a safe Halloween.